Hi, everyone. As I see the numbers climb up, I recognize that Leah has started the session. So I am hi, I'm Dyani. I'm just going to wait just another minute or so to make sure everyone is able to join us. Do definitely have some housekeeping points, so I want to make sure everyone kind of is on the same page about how to participate. So want to just wait, like I said, another minute or so to make sure that everyone is going to hear my instructions. So thank you everyone for joining us. Again, my name is Dyani Feige. I'm the Director of Preservation Services at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. I realize that my tinted lensed glasses are like completely unideal for looking at a computer, for the way it looks when I'm looking at a computer screen. So please bear with me on that. Welcome everyone to our first community conversation session where we're hoping to have a open-ended conversation. And I really do emphasize that I hope it is and can be an actual dialogue, conversation, not just, I definitely do not have a script prepared to talk at you. So hopefully at least some of the attendees have come prepared to talk and share thoughts, and we can hopefully learn from each other. That's kind of the aim and intent of this whole series, is that we want to know what you all are experiencing and asking questions about, so that we at the Conservation Center know where to kind of focus our efforts in researching and in coming up with resources and information for you, our audience, but also really truly so we can just learn from each other. If anyone has had interesting or experiences or unusual or unexpected outcomes from attempting to care for collections remotely. Before we even get started with the logistics, and I mentioned there's definitely housekeeping to go over. I want to just acknowledge that we always try and say somewhere in all of our emergency preparedness and disaster response programming, human health and safety is absolutely paramount and the ultimate concern in any collections care efforts. So, want to just kind of recognize and acknowledge that there may be some of us out there, whether it's us participating in the conversation this afternoon or some of our colleagues or coworkers who are dealing with a lot more than collections care right now. So assume that our conversation is coming after the point of determining that you and your staff are staying as safe and healthy as possible. So as far as how the conversation is going to proceed, there are two options for either asking questions or sharing responses. The chat is definitely the most kind of standard, straightforward option, and that's where you click on, I think for most of us, it's towards the bottom middle of the screen. There's a little voice bubble that says chat. You just click on that and type in your question or comment. The other option, that is not recorded. So that maintaining a record of that as part of the proceeding requires me or another participant essentially reading it out loud, which is totally fine. But I also wanted to let you know that there is an option to speak if your computer audio is set up to do so through Zoom. You all, when you came in, the default was for everyone to be muted, and we're going to keep it that way. But if you have a question and you want to speak, if you have that audio capability set up and enabled through your computer or phone or whatever you're using, please click on the raise hand option. My coworker Leah is moderating and monitoring attendees, and when she sees that someone has a hand raised, she should be able to unmute that person so you can actually vocalize your question. And just for kind of the conversational element, for the ongoing posterity of what we're talking about, that would kind of be my preference, but I totally understand that not everyone is necessarily set up to do that on their computer, and that maybe not everyone was expecting to do that. Maybe you're not in a place where you can speak, and that's totally fine in that case. I will see your question if you chat it. So without further ado, the one kind of intro thing that we wanted to attempt is, this is a little bit new for us as well. If anyone has participated in our Putting Best Practices into Practice webinar series, you might be familiar with our open Q&A forums that we do through those. But one thing that we have not experimented with in any of those yet is a poll. And we are going to attempt to pull in some poll questions right now. So Leah, can you please launch the poll? And bear with us if, okay, great. So you should be able to, actually I'm not 100% certain if you're able to select multiple options or if you have to just select one. I'd say try to select multiple options if it's gonna let you. You can select multiple options. Good, that's how I was hoping it would be set up. So yeah, so in this time when so many of us are quarantined, attempting to work remotely, at the very least operating under different and changing circumstances with the COVID-19 pandemic, what is your current primary worry? Are you kind of most concerned with health and self-care, overall considerations with health of yourself or health of other individuals? Are you concerned about the economy? Are you concerned about cultural institutions, whether in general or specific to yours? Are you concerned about politics? Are you concerned about some of those but not others? Are you concerned about all of them? So go ahead and just take a moment or two to enter your selections there. And Leah, I'm not sure if you are seeing the selections as they're coming in, but in maybe a minute, if you want to close it. Okay. All right, so hopefully everyone's had about enough time to at least think through some of those options there. And Leah, if you close it, will we be able to all see the results? Okay. The other thing I should mention, as if it's not completely obvious. Oh, okay. Well, so, oh, good. Okay, great. Good. So these are all of the results. So, you know, unsurprisingly, health and self-care, whether that's for ourselves or just for others in the world, is definitely the primary concern. And that's, you know, that's really what I assumed and what we were kind of going in under the assumption of. And there were definitely a number of all of the aboves as well. Oh, it's disheartening to see that more of you selected that you were concerned about your specific cultural institution than cultural institutions at large. So, you know, I think definitely what that shows us is that we all have a very, very specific and direct stake in world events and implications. All right, so let's go ahead and launch the second poll. And then after just a moment or two with that, we can move into the conversation. So once again, in this one, you are able to select multiple options. Really, this one, I now suddenly regret not including a none of the above, because it's entirely possible that some of your organizations, some of your jobs, your situations, your collections have just completely gone on pause for the moment. But if your organization is reacting to working remotely with any of these methods, whether it's developing educational activities or opportunities, taking the time to review policies or planning efforts, taking the time to review housekeeping practices, opening up tours, as many museums and other types of public institutions have been doing, creating enhanced opportunities for digital communication or engagement with the public. You know, are you focusing efforts a little more on digital collections in the time of working remotely? Are you providing more digital reference? None of the, okay, yeah, at least one person states none of the above, and that is a helpful input. So we'll take just another minute or so, and then Leah can go ahead and close. That, and yeah, let's see what folks are working on while working remotely. Maybe. Maybe not. That's okay. Let's use this opportunity to launch into the conversation then. No, Leah, I don't see the poll results up. I don't see the poll up any longer. Ah, there they are. Okay. Great. Well, I mean, that's fantastic that so many organizations, 72% of organizations are working on ways to really stay connected, probably primarily through digital means, and communicate or engage with the public. That's also great. I mean, from my personal collections care interest standpoint, I like to see, it's great that you're using this time to review policies or planning efforts. So fantastic. Thank you. So we are going to launch or attempt to launch into the conversation element of this. Again, please bear with us. Please be gentle and patient. This is the first time we've done anything like this. It might go amazingly. I don't think it's going to go terribly, but I can't guarantee anything. So like I said towards the top, could you please let us know how many people are participating so we can understand the polling percentages a bit more? Well, at least from what I saw, and I think it would have been what everyone saw. Leah, can you bring that last results back up if it wasn't lost? So we have currently 69 participants logged in. I don't expect that everyone necessarily participated in the polls, but the polls, at least on the view that I saw, I could see the numbers of people. So 58 individuals participated in that last poll. So yeah, cool. So with that, I wanted to just kind of build off of that last poll and ask all of you, since we are hoping that this is kind of a conversation and a discussion, and hopeful at some point within the hour that we can have you all interacting, engaging with each other to a certain extent. I wanted to just ask, specifically thinking about collections care, because at the Conservation Center, that is kind of our primary focus of educational content, is collections care, preservation, to a slightly lesser but still certainly important extent, collections management. How are you providing care to collections remotely? And you can either enter responses in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll see if we're able to, if our moderator is able to unmute folks to actually talk. But I'm interested in, you know, so lumped in with that option up there was creating or updating policies, working on planning documents. If that's the case, elaborate on that. Or do you have remote monitoring for environment? Or are you able to check in on collections somehow remotely through security staff or security cameras even? Just tossing out some ideas. Just interested to hear about how you are kind of thinking about and handling and trying to wrap your minds around caring for collections. So because the webinar does not record the chats, I am going to, this is going to be a little maybe clunky, but I'm going to read when individuals type in chats. So one person responded, our university has made collections care difficult because they have restricted access. Our director is the only one who is supposed to check facilities, but he has several things to check, not just collections. Yeah, absolutely a concern. And if anyone is in the same boat, but maybe has an idea about how to combat that concern, that would be fantastic. Another person indicated, we have 50 environmental sensors going that I installed one day before we were sent home. That's fantastic. Another person has environmental monitoring remotely. Another person has security check-in daily. So I noticed that there are two
Hello. You've
Hi.
invited me to unmute.
Yes, you are. We can hear you. Hi, Judy.
Hi. I am at the American Folk Art Museum in New York City, and I am the collections manager, and I do live walking distance from the museum facility where we have part of our permanent collection on view. So I am able to do facility walkthroughs on a periodic basis. However, the collection is stored off-site in another facility, so I do not go there. And there are, occasionally staff people that will go there and do a walkthrough, just, to sort of do a physical check.
Mhm.
Other than that, and perhaps my colleague who is also on this can chime in about any other things that we have going, but I'm sort of holding down the fort of the facility because we don't have, any other sort of like security staff that stays on a 24-hour basis, other than of course the monitors and things like that.
Sure. Yeah. So when someone is checking on the collections in the offsite facility, do they have, how is that structured? Is there like a structured list of things that they're specifically supposed to be checking or monitoring, or are they just kind of literally doing a walkthrough and seeing everything looks in order? How kind of is that laid out?
It's more the walkthrough, the condition walkthrough, plus the structural, making sure there aren't leaks and things like that, because we're in a multi-use building. And even in a single-use building, you could have leaks and so forth. So, when the problem is, at the moment, there isn't a real structure to the schedule, which I don't know what, that because
Yeah,
it entails someone commuting to get there. So, we kind
sure.
of have to put people's health and safety first.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I wondered, one person wrote in the chat, our security staff is taking pictures and shares them with us, which that strikes me as a really nice kind of balance between, having to go through some really intensive kind of checklist, but it's pretty easy to just, I imagine, pretty easy to just snap some shots and send them to collection staff. So I think that's a really nice solution. So.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you, Judy. Is there anything else you wanted to add? I feel like I'm a radio call-in host. I had no idea that how it would feel, but anything else you wanted to share or add, or any questions you have for other participants?
Uh, if I think of something, I'll type it in. Thank you. Thanks for
Sounds good.
listening.
Thank you. Um, Hi, Samantha. What's up?
Hi.
Samantha's my coworker.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, cool. Well, you guys sort of hit a little bit on what I was going to suggest and things I've been reading about other people doing. So I work with Dyani at CCAHA, so we don't necessarily have to, we don't have that many collections at CCAHA, but I've been working with a lot of other people discussing ways to approach this. And I kind of feel like this is a great opportunity to maybe build some bridges between the facilities or security staff and kind of give them a little bit more training that might even be helpful in the future about issues with collections that they should be alert to. So, I'm looking at silver linings here and wondering if this might be a good opportunity to maybe do some training with those people in specific about what are issues that need attention and what are things to look for that they might not have been doing before all of this. And I think the ideas about taking pictures, and I see somebody is talking about doing a Zoom tutorial on condition issues to check on, that kind of thing, which I feel like is a good opportunity here if we're going to look at some silver linings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, use the time and use the new different modes of communication to try to figure out if there are ways that communication can be better fostered, better maintained. I mean, I know in some ways it's a little ironic, but as Samantha mentioned, we're not a collecting institution at the Conservation Center, but we are very frequently out on the road doing assessments, doing educational programs. And so in some strange ways, just being connected over Zoom so continuously over the past few weeks has made sometimes me feel like our team is communicating almost more than ever. So that could be a silver lining if anyone's in situations where people are not on site as frequently. So yeah, look for the silver linings. So I just wanted to read a few other comments that came in through the chat because we had some really great ones. One person mentioned updating disaster plans, which is a fantastic use of this time. Absolutely. Logging into cameras in galleries and storage spaces, and then checking on the spaces on an infrequent but set basis. Someone presumably from a library stating emptying our library book returns. That's, yeah, super critical for circulating collections. Absolutely. A collections manager / registrar working on site in isolation, and then other staff members take turns on the weekend just to make sure there is a ongoing presence there. We had a new HVAC system installed, and it is in a 2-month test, so it's being monitored daily. That's another kind of timing silver lining. Let's see. I managed to get myself as head of special collections and university archives listed as essential personnel under the heading Building and Operations Integrity. That's fantastic. That's really excellent. So I would say, you know, some of these things might be too far along to make those changes now in essential personnel type requirements, regulations, but going forward, an absolute case for the importance of having some collection staff representative identified as essential personnel. That would be probably primarily for, you know, a university library, but maybe in the case of a museum, depending on what your response structure is. In some urban environments, I know there are emergency credentials by which you can use to access sites, even if your neighborhood has been closed down for an emergency. I know in the Philadelphia region, it's under the Corporate Emergency Access System, and it's really just it's you know a pretty low stress credentialing qualifications that you have to go through, and then you get a little card and badge that states that you have access to a space, even if your region, your neighborhood has been technically closed to the public for some reason. Unfortunately, there are a few of you responding that states no one is allowed access and don't have remote monitoring. So that, you know, I feel you. That I can imagine that is a stressful situation. Able to monitor environmental conditions remotely and have a mechanical staff that are able to receive alerts. Yeah, it seems like a number of folks have you know, one dedicated person going in on a set basis, or certain dedicated people going in on a set basis. We, at the Conservation Center, our staff member who is our kind of de facto building facilities liaison is going to the center on a routine basis just to check on certainly our offices and all of our equipment and everything, but stuff that we needed to keep stored there during the closure. Yeah, and I finally got down to the, obviously way behind Samantha, but I finally got down to the person who suggested giving security staff a Zoom tutorial specifically on condition issues to check on. Another option, you know, is if you have security personnel, or if you have only one dedicated personnel who's going to the space, and if you have this type of connectivity and Wi-Fi capability, do like a FaceTime walkthrough, and you can say, hey, we are always concerned about the northwest corner. That's the one where we've gotten a lot of leaks in the past. Can you walk me back there and show me how that corner is looking? And, or, you know, this is our area of collection shelving that has been covered with plastic in the past, and we just want to make sure that there's no debris buildup on top of the plastic, etc. So we've used less severe instances over the years to justify more training for security, and it can also prompt better collection emergency preparedness. Absolutely, and that's one of the things that, you know, depending on how much audience participation in, I came in kind of prepared to talk about and really advocate for and recommend is, if one thing, use this time as an opportunity to work on an emergency plan. Emergency planning is one of those so critical, super critical needs at organizations that tends to get put on the back burner because it is very time consuming and because it is kind of unpleasant to think about those scenarios that we, of course, would never want to actually confront. But hey, we're in a scary time anyway. We're concerned and scared about our collections to begin with anyway. Use that time of justifiable, absolutely understandable worry for good, for gathering research, gathering resources of emergency tools, templates. A number of organizations have sections or at least templates and forms for their emergency planning initiatives online. So gather those, you know, look into what might be scalable and relevant for your organization. If you have a full emergency plan in place, make sure that it's updated, make sure that it is still relevant. At the very, very least, use this as a time to update the call list, to update your contact chain of, you know, call tree. Maybe going as far as chain of command. That's a bit of a deeper dive, but I know that the Conservation Center, that is one of the first things that we did in our time of all working remotely, is we identified some more updated and more kind of intensive chain of command procedures for emergency incidents. Another participant, this is another thing that, you know, definitely wondered if we would have some conversation about, but another participant mentions updating housekeeping plans to include pandemic cleaning. There are definitely a good number of resources out there now. It feels like they're still changing hourly about the best way to kind of physically care for collections now and in the future, given concerns about COVID-19. Samantha, my coworker who just spoke up, is publishing a blog that's kind of like an annotated bibliography of resources specifically on that subject on the American Association for State and Local Histories Field Services Alliance blog. I don't think that's published yet, but I imagine we will definitely, at the Conservation Center, will definitely include that in an upcoming news blast that we send out. Samantha just really went through, and it's fantastic because she went through and compiled resources and also wrote kind of brief descriptions about how they can be helpful for your organization now, and if, God forbid, anything like this were to happen again in the future, how we can be better prepared. Another organization is currently working through AAM's Museum Assessment Program, which is allowing them to go through strategic plans and policies, including policies related to disaster preparedness and collections care. But I imagine other planning documents, you know, potentially bigger picture or wider scope planning documents and policies as well, which is excellent. Update and hone IPM, absolutely, yes. Better document trap placement, building and envelope issues, quantify seasonal pest activity. So definitely all things that you don't necessarily have to be on site or be spending extensive time on site in order to kind of do that research on your building envelope, and, you know, analyzing the data. Okay, and another person, I'm not positive if I'm so behind in the chat, but I'm not positive if this came after my conversation about the having yourself designated as necessary or essential. Things are still in such flux that I would encourage people to still try to make yourself designated as necessary. I've seen multiple circumstances where things got added or redefined after an order or something similar. Absolutely, absolutely. A problem with access at a storage facility is that someone would be required to commute on public transportation. Yeah, and that's not ideal, to say the least, at this moment. That's actually why, before my office officially closed, I made the decision to start working remotely myself, because I pretty much have to commute on public transit. Yeah, so, and someone commented, we had a good emergency plan, but this is different than anything envisioned. We're taking our work at home time, updating our plan, and hoping we won't have to use that new section. So, okay, so one specific question: what is your recommendation on cleaning material being returned to a library? Paper, bookbinding cloth, plastic covered materials. So since, Samantha, if you're still here, I know that you just have been doing a little research on this. Yeah, how do I, yeah. Oh, I can't, oh.
Hi, can you hear me again? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Getting the hang of this raise the hand thing.
Yes.
So isolation is really the best route here for killing the virus. There's two kind of different ways. There's cleaning and there's disinfecting. Cleaning is just basically relocating, I guess, the virus. So, you know, you can wipe something off and then you throw away the wipe and you throw away the virus, and that gets rid of it. Disinfecting actually kills the virus, so that's a little bit more effective. However, the materials that you need to actually kill the virus are damaging to especially paper, library archival material, papers, books, all of that. So the kind of recommendations right now is for isolation of those materials in particular. And you can isolate them, you know, similar to how you would isolate something if it was a pest or mold infestation. You can bag it, put it in a plastic bin, something like that. The virus has been shown that it can live on surfaces for perhaps even up to 9 days, maybe even a little bit longer than that. So it'd be best to isolate things for about 2 weeks, like we're doing with ourselves, to ensure that the virus is gone. So that's kind of the best thing right now. Anything that would be effective in killing the virus, bleach, alcohol, etc., are going to be really damaging to the paper and archival materials. So we don't want to put those on there. So the isolation recommendation is really sort of the best thing we've got for now.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, I could have muddled through that, some of that myself, but I knew since you had just done a lot of research on it, Samantha.
No problem.
And one resource on that goes into specific material types and discusses that isolation as well is through the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training. I don't know if anyone, oh, and it looks like IMLS just did a good webinar today that specifically discussed cleaning, etc., for paper items. And that webinar will be posted to the link there. I wonder, Samantha, do you have that NCPTT link relatively quickly at hand? That you could maybe post in the chat box as well. Awesome, thank you. All right, let me go back up. So let's see. So a few minutes ago, someone wrote in the chat box from a National Park Service site, chief curator attempting to go in once a week to check the storage areas. They're in contact with maintenance and security, but specifically concerned about the archaeology lab where work stopped in progress. Objects were secured, but are still essentially out on the tables. I wonder, I can't even, oh, Deborah. Deborah, I wonder if you could clarify in the chat, are you primarily concerned about those items, those objects, physical safety and security? Are you concerned about their just, you know, staying out and exposed to the environment? What just elaborate a little bit more on your concern so I can try to help give you some thoughts. Yeah, so one other person mentioned they're associated with the local community library and the library book drop has been closed for over a week. Our library director is and has been working with ALA and they're working through this. And by this, I'm assuming that, that it was the discussion on cleaning or isolating books once they're concerned. Yeah, definitely for libraries. I mean, especially public libraries, but certainly, you know, academic, any type of circulating library. Most of what I've heard is just completely holding off on due dates and fines and everything. My kids this morning just made a really kind of sad, sweet comment about feeling sad that they can't return their books to the library because someone else might want them. So, you know, even the youth are worried about the collections. So Samantha posted this. So the link, the one that starts out ncptt.nps.gov, that's the one from the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training. And that's the one that it was also a conversation, a recorded conversation, but you can read the full transcript. And it gives a lot of good information on specific material types and, again, cleaning versus isolation. And I think that's where even the 9-day figure that Samantha mentioned, it was cited in there as well. Let's see. All right, so I finally caught up to the bottom of the chat. So there's kind of a moment of quiet and lull. And here's where I will put out my kind of even more challenging question, and that's more challenging for us at the Conservation Center. What other information are you looking for? We definitely got, you're looking for information about safe cleaning materials, safe cleaning methods, cleaning versus disinfecting. We will be doing these community conversations on a roughly weekly basis, planned through April, hoping that we don't have to do them much longer after that, but who knows at this point. I know just this morning some governors have stated that services are definitely going to remain closed through April 30th at least. So in our future weeks, you know, to a certain extent, our future weeks of these conversations are going to be just as open-ended, but we can also try to come prepared with more tools and resources, and certainly understanding and acknowledging that things are changing so constantly. Templates. One participant wrote, we'd love some templates on developing emergency procedures and policies for those organizations that are developing them from scratch. We do have some resources. We don't have anything as full-blown as, you know, a full emergency plan template or anything on our website, but there are some resources on the CCAHA.org website, some resources on the planning process, on building and forming teams, and what type of information and resources you might need to be gathering. For an organization that is starting emergency preparedness truly from scratch, what I would definitely recommend is the Council of State Archivists PREP document. It was developed by archivists, but it's absolutely relevant for all types of collecting cultural institutions. So great, thanks Leah. That's our link to our resources up there. But the COSA PREP plan, pocket response plan, it is what it is you can, if you Google COSA PREP, you will get you can download their Word document template for a 2-sided but 1-sheet document that aims to include everything that you could possibly need in the first 12 to 24, maybe even up to 48 hours of discovering an emergency or disaster. So all of those super critical first phone numbers, the very most important first steps to take, the kind of top ranking individuals on the chain of command, and Leah linked to that as well. The statearchivists.org web link is for that PREP template. Definitely recommend starting with that. If you've done little to nothing in terms of getting emergency preparedness down on paper, that's going to be a first step. So this is in response to the individual who was concerned about artifacts that were left out. All the artifacts, we have about 25,000 out right now, are in trays or on tables where they're being washed, labeled, put back together, or cataloged. Lots of different things going on in what is typically organized chaos. I should have prefaced this by saying that I secured everything, both physically and from a security standpoint, but I'm concerned about dust, pests, and general prolonged deterioration for objects that have been taped or glued back together. This might be too simple, but just gonna say it anyway. I wonder if just placing a sheet of plain pure cotton over the tables, that would at least cut down, it would essentially restrict dust and would cut down a great deal on pests. It's not really going to be a barrier in terms of prolonged deterioration the way that having something in a more long-term enclosure would be a barrier, but it might be a good interim solution for at least the next couple, knock on wood, hopefully only weeks. And, you know, thinking of a cloth, drape, cotton, or just plain muslin instead of plastic plastic is gonna be more of a barrier, but also potentially more of a risk for a microclimate if the relative humidity, particularly in the space, skyrockets for some reason. Cleaning recommendations once the museum reopens to the public. So, and sharing revised disaster plans relevant to the pandemic. Yeah, the revised disaster plans relevant to the pandemic, that's a really good thing for us to work on. That's something that, you know, I have not seen much of yet, but I'm sure organizations and my colleagues will be working on putting those together in the weeks to come. So yeah, that's definitely that'll be a great place for us to focus efforts. And then cleaning recommendations once the museum reopens to the public. Yeah, and I mean, I think when this whole incident has been kind of unfolding so quickly, and I think back a few weeks ago, that was what people were asking questions about, right? Is how do we keep our space really clean now, assuming that we might have members of the public just walking through, but with this somewhat heightened level of concern and safety and security. So, you know, maybe taking some of those practices and moving them forward. I think that NCPTT resource has some good information about cleaning spaces, cleaning different types of materials, but we can definitely look into more on that as well. And then another participant linked out to a site from a team in Delaware that's compiled some good resources for emergency planning. Thanks very much for that. And then, yes, as we are getting close to the end of the hour, questions coming in, we might want to kind of try and focus some time on in another session, but a question for exhibits that were left on display. you know, maybe kind of the ongoing preservation concerns of things being left up longer than they were intended to, things being left up unmonitored longer than they were intended to, even if the display was intended to be up for a certain duration of time. And then, yeah, this not final necessarily, but this last on the bottom chat right now is I've seen several museums, including my own, that have donated gloves and other PPE from emergency supply stores to medical professionals. I wanted to flag this as an opportunity in case others have access to potentially life-saving PPE that they won't be using in the immediate future. And that's a fantastic, yeah, we at the Conservation Center just made a everything's relative, right? For us, it was huge. For a hospital, it was probably just, they were grateful to receive anything. But yeah, we donated a bunch of gloves and respirators and masks and some other protective coverings to a local hospital just this weekend. And I know that that's something that emergency preparedness networks, who some of the actions that emergency preparedness networks take is developing shared disaster response caches of materials. And I know that some of the ones that we've worked with in Pennsylvania have donated stores of their supplies as well. Definitely something to look into if you do have access to your site and to emergency supplies and they haven't been, they're just sitting there, you know, before your institution needs to replenish the supplies, we'll be able to get masks and gloves, etc. again. But right now it's the hospitals and testing sites and just healthcare agencies writ large desperately need those materials. So that's definitely a fantastic solution. So I am going to go ahead and start wrapping this up. At the Conservation Center, you can reach us at any time. Email is definitely best while we're not in the office, but if you forget and give us a call, we're checking our voicemail too. This is probably not super relevant to all of you here this afternoon, but because you have joined us through Zoom, but if you have any colleagues, friends, relatives, anyone who doesn't necessarily have access to software like Zoom or a computer that would be useful to view it on, we have phone office hours as well. Every Thursday, we have a member of our staff who's manning essentially, and it's essentially an ad hoc emergency number, but just Thursday afternoons from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern. That phone number is should be up on the contact info on our website, and it's you can find it through our social media and website as well. But if you want to just call and have a direct conversation, or if you have a question that you don't necessarily want to broadcast to an audience of 50 plus individuals, you can call her then as well. Again, very much like this conversation. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Leah. There's the number, the 484 number is to reach Stephanie on Thursday afternoons, afternoon Eastern. She, again, like these chats, she's definitely not trying to guarantee or promise that she'll have all the answers, but she wants to find out and compile the questions that you do have so we can know how to better continue serving you. Oh, and then one, I am gonna kind of call this and leave the meeting after this, but one, maybe a final comment. A participant mentioned that car rental agencies are still providing services if anyone needs to keep essential staff off of public transit. That's definitely something to consider if that's what's kind of standing between anyone being able to access your site and not. Definitely something to look into. So thank you for that information. And I am going to go ahead and close this meeting. Thanks so much for bearing with our experiment, our technical experiment, everything. You know, I think all things considered, it went all right. And we will be having one again next week on April 7th. That one will be hosted by my coworker Samantha, who ended up making some appearances here as well, but same essential format. No structured, no planned lecture or anything. Definitely if there's been any new informative developments in collections care remotely, she can share that as well, but mostly just intended to be a time for sharing our information and asking questions. And I want to, thank everyone so much for participating. Always is good to connect. Stay healthy, wash your hands, stay home when you can, and we will be in touch. Thanks, everyone.